My name's Elise, and I never thought I'd survive this nightmare, let alone live to tell it. In a courthouse restroom, my sister Clara pinned me to the cold tile, her razor buzzing as she sheared my hair to the scalp. "This is for your own good, Elise," she hissed, her voice dripping with venom, "to keep you in line." But it was a calculated strike to break me before I could face the stand. What she didn't know was that the man I love, the one she sneered at as a nobody, was about to stride in, cloaked in the judicial robe she thought she owned. When he took the bench, her smug grin faltered at the words he read aloud. "Before I reveal what shattered her world when the gavel fell, tell me, where are you reading this from? What time is it there? Drop it in the comments below." The air carried the scent of damp brick and salt, old Savannah draped in early mist. My heels clicked on the courthouse steps, crisp and deliberate, ringing louder than my nerves inside. "You're walking into a trap, Elise," my cousin's voicemail echoed in my mind, her warning from last night. I clutched the canvas briefcase, my thesis defense relic, its leather cracked like my resolve. That day, I'd felt ready. Today, less so. This was Clara's stage, not mine. This wasn't meant to be about me. I was just here to watch. Maybe lend support. Or so I told myself. Inside, the granite floor gleamed under harsh fluorescent lights. The security guard barely glanced up as I passed, but others did. Eyes tracked me with that look, the one that asked, "What's she doing here?" "She's got no place here," a cousin muttered, loud enough to sting. It was never overt, just subtle jabs of glances from people I once called kin. I saw them across the lobby. My mother stood rigid, arms folded like she was steeling herself for a blow, and Clara, my older sister, sat poised in her cream blazer, legs crossed, smirking like she'd already claimed a prize I didn't know I was vying for. Her eyes locked on mine, daring me to falter. I kept moving. A woman at the check-in desk beckoned me over. Her tone was courteous but detached. "Name?" "Elise Carver," I replied, offering a small smile. She scanned her list, her brow creasing slightly, then handed me a badge. I didn't look at it until I pinned it to my jacket and felt a chill slink down my spine. In stark black letters, E. Nobody. I blinked. "This isn't right," I said, voice steady but firm. "It should say Carver. Elise Carver." The woman barely glanced up. "Clara's orders," she whispered, avoiding my gaze. "That's what's on the list, ma'am. If you want to speak to someone, you'll need to wait, but you can't enter the courtroom without a badge." The words struck deeper than they should have. I wasn't shocked, not really. Across the lobby, Clara was watching. She lifted her phone slowly, deliberately, and I caught the faint click of a photo as her screen mirrored my badge. "Post it, Clara," her friend urged, smirking from beside her. She tilted her head and grinned like a kid who'd pulled a trick and couldn't wait for the fallout. I didn't react. I just nodded and turned away. If this was a game, I wasn't going to give her the response she craved. I adjusted the badge, smoothing it against my chest like I wore it with pride. But my hand lingered too long, pressing hard. My fingers trembled, betraying the calm I forced. I could feel the edges cutting into my palm. It was as if someone had etched the truth of how they saw me. Like I was nothing, irrelevant. Maybe they believed it. Maybe they wanted me to believe it too. The corridor to the courtroom was silent. Too silent. Each step felt heavier, like my shoes were sinking into the floor. My mother turned slightly away as I passed, subtle but enough. "You should have stayed home," she murmured, barely audible. This wasn't just about a court case. It was a signal. The badge was a declaration, and Clara had delivered it with flair. I took a seat on the far side, far from the family row. As I sat, I glanced at the badge again. E. Nobody. Not a mistake, a choice. Maybe I'd always been a shadow in this family. The quiet one, the one who agreed too easily, the one who didn't push back because she thought silence was strength. Maybe they mistook my silence for fragility. I gripped the badge tighter, letting the edges bite until I felt a sting, like a reminder. Across the aisle, Clara leaned over and whispered to our mother, then laughed behind her hand. "She's finished," Clara mouthed, her eyes glinting with malice. They weren't even pretending anymore. The court doors opened, people shuffled in, heels tapping, papers crinkling, the faint coughs of someone impatient or jaded. I stood to enter. Clara passed me slowly, her perfume lingering like a second presence. She leaned in close, just enough for me to feel her breath as she whispered, "You'll regret stepping foot here, Elise. This is my arena." I didn't give one because I already knew what this was. This wasn't their custody hearing. It was mine. The door closed behind me with a soft thud that echoed louder than it should have in a courtroom full of murmurs and watchful eyes. I took a seat near the back, not far from the counsel table, but far enough to blend into the shadows, my heart pounding like a war drum, if that was even possible in a room built for scrutiny. The badge still clung to my jacket like an unearned slight. I sat up straight, crossed my legs, and tried to melt into the chair. The judge hadn't arrived yet. I wasn't on the docket, not officially. "No cousin, no case?" a clerk's whisper to another reached my ears. I was only here for a distant cousin's custody hearing, or so I'd been told. That's the story Clara fed me. Now, I wasn't sure there ever was a cousin. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as Clara's attorney stood, smoothing his suit with rehearsed precision. His voice was calm but laden with staged authority. "Your Honor, we'd like to begin with a brief presentation to provide essential context about the environment surrounding this case." Context. That word landed wrong. I blinked as the screen on the far wall flickered on. A projector hummed softly, a PowerPoint slide appeared. And there it was. My face, massive, blown up tenfold. My shoulders slumped, my expression caught mid-blink, unguarded. Below it, the badge, clear as day. No. Gasps rippled through the room like a tide hitting the shore. A few people shifted in their seats. One juror raised an eyebrow. Another whispered to their neighbor. Clara's attorney gestured with one hand, smooth as a showman. "She's a liability, Your Honor," he declared, voice dripping with disdain. "This image was taken this morning. We thought it vital to show how certain individuals have inserted themselves into this proceeding, uninvited, unstable." I gripped the bench so hard my nails dug into the polished wood. My knuckles whitened, betraying my fury. I didn't move, didn't blink. The lights made sweat bead along my collarbone. I forced my jaw to stay relaxed. I wasn't going to let them have that. The lawyer clicked to the next slide. Metadata and timestamps, but something was wrong. The time code claimed the photo was taken at 6:43 a.m., before the court opened, before I arrived. That wasn't possible. I'd parked at 7:19. I remembered because I'd checked the time while looking at the court map. I'd even snapped a photo of the courthouse myself, time-stamped. My throat tightened. My mind snapped into focus, gears grinding. They'd planned this, I whispered to myself, pulse racing. They'd faked it. Clara, or someone in her orbit, had tampered with the metadata. She wasn't just humiliating me, she was framing me. A whisper from the judge cut through. "Is Miss Carver even on the witness list?" The attorney's lips curled into something too smug to be unintentional. "She's an intruder," he sneered, glancing my way. "No, Your Honor." She showed up on her own, walked in with that badge, sat down, and well, he let his voice trail off, like it pained him to finish. "You can't teach boundaries." I turned my gaze to Clara. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She knew I'd look. She just smoothed her skirt and watched the screen like she was proud of it. I'd seen this before, years ago. I was 14. Our parents threw a joint birthday party for us every year since we were kids. But that year, Clara left my name off the invitations. "It's my day, not yours," she'd taunted, tossing my gift aside. The whole class showed up thinking it was her party alone, and she never corrected them. That night, I sat on the porch steps, eating cake alone, pretending it didn't hurt to be erased. This moment, this courtroom, that same sting, amplified in public. But this time, I wasn't 14, and I wasn't going to vanish. I closed my eyes for a moment, not to cry, to recalibrate. The courtroom buzzed around me, but I was scanning, assessing. Then I noticed him. In the far back corner, a man sat quietly, arms folded, no notes, no laptop. His suit was worn but tidy. His eyes weren't on the attorney. They were on Clara, unblinking, unsmiling, watching her like someone who'd seen a facade crack before. His stare was a blade, cutting through her charade. He didn't look like press. He didn't whisper to anyone. He just observed. And something about the way he leaned in when Clara spoke. It was like he was waiting. Not for the story, but for the moment she'd falter. He didn't take notes. He just watched her, like he already knew who she was. Before I could figure out who he was, a soft rustle broke the tension. A clerk approached the judge with a sealed envelope. Plain, no markings, no stamps, just crisp and foreboding. "It arrived under guard," the clerk whispered, voice taut with unease. The judge's brow furrowed, suggesting it wasn't part of the plan. "Your Honor," the clerk said softly, "this was delivered just now, marked urgent, anonymous sender." The judge opened it slowly, like uncovering something foul. Silence blanketed the room. His eyes scanned the contents, pausing longer than they should have. He stiffened, as if struck by the words. He glanced at me for a second that stretched too long before turning to the court reporter. "Please record this as an addendum to the hearing exhibits," he instructed, tapping the document twice, before setting it down with a heavy sigh. Then he looked at me. "Miss Carver," he said, voice measured but not unkind, "are you aware of a psychological evaluation in your name from the Savannah Behavioral Health Center, dated March 2018? My pulse staggered. The words lodged in my throat. That place, that year. I hadn't spoken of it in nearly a decade. I barely let myself think about it. It wasn't therapy, it wasn't recovery. It was silence cloaked in clinical forms. The attorney stood again, lips curving into something too polished to be genuine. "She's a danger to herself, Your Honor," he intoned, casting a pitying glance my way. "Your Honor, we present this only to provide full context about Miss Carver's mental stability. The document was uncovered by a concerned party. We believe it speaks for itself." The projector flipped to a new page. Clinical, cold. Diagnosis, emotional volatility, impulse dysregulation. I didn't recognize the words because they weren't mine. They weren't me. I wasn't unstable. I was 20, locked out during a rainstorm by my sister. I was drenched, shaking after she'd bolted the door and ignored my calls. It was supposed to be a joke. Her friends giggling from the porch. "Let her stew, she'll learn," Clara had laughed, slamming the window shut. "She'll be fine, she always overreacts." I'd collapsed on the steps, soaked and trembling, until a neighbor called paramedics. But the next day, our mother whispered, "This is what happens when you make a scene. People will think you're unhinged. Do you want that?" She drove me herself, quietly, deliberately, to a clinic 2 hours away. She signed the forms. I stayed for 48 hours, and when I returned, no one in the family mentioned it again, not even me, not until now. My heart hammered like it wanted to break free, but my face stayed still, I wouldn't give Clara the satisfaction of seeing me crack. She sat calmly at the table, hands folded, lips tight. But there was the faintest smirk at the corner of her mouth, her eyes glinting like a predator savoring the kill. "This isn't therapy," I whispered to myself. "It's erasure." Because that's what they did. Recast everything I endured as some shameful fiction. "You're nothing but a lie," I mouthed silently, staring at her. "If you control the story, you don't need the truth." I glanced at my mother, 2 rows behind Clara, clutching her purse like it might detonate. She didn't look at me. She looked down. "You've shamed us all," she'd hissed at me last night. Of course she did. The judge asked if I had a response. I stood slowly, cleared my throat. My voice wavered, but not from fear. That file was created without my consent. I was never diagnosed. I was placed in that clinic by family members who wanted to avoid questions, not because I was a threat. The real threat was being locked out in a storm for existing. A murmur spread. The judge didn't reply, just nodded for the record to reflect my statement. No judgment, no validation, just paper. Because in a courtroom, facts don't matter, only what's documented. I sat down and caught movement from the corner of my eye. The man in the back stood for the first time. He walked with slow, deliberate steps, approached the bailiff and leaned in. They exchanged hushed words. "This changes everything," the bailiff muttered, eyes wide. The judge's eyes narrowed. He picked up the microphone. "Miss Carver," he said again, "please remain seated." "There's been a development." Clara's head snapped around, and for the first time all day she looked scared. The judge's gavel tapped twice, not to close the session, but to pause it. A wave of tension rolled through the room like heat rising from asphalt. "We'll take a brief recess," he announced, though no one stirred. "Counselors and parties involved, please join me in chambers." Marcus Vinton didn't wait for an invitation. He walked with a precision that felt disciplined, his presence a silent storm, his coat unwrinkled, his gaze unwavering. He passed Clara without a glance, but she flinched anyway. I followed the stream of suits in silence down a narrow hallway to the judicial chamber. The wood here felt older, less theatrical, like the truth didn't need grand staging. The judge closed the door. "Mr. Vinton, I assume you're not here for leisure?" Marcus nodded once and placed a sealed manila envelope on the desk. A faint watermark from the Department of Justice gleamed under the chamber's lights. "This will unravel her lies," he said, voice low and certain. "You'll want to review this before proceeding further," he said evenly. "It pertains to the misuse of sealed federal records, namely Exhibit 12A, submitted to undermine Miss Elise Carver's credibility." Clara opened her mouth, likely to protest, but the judge raised a hand. "You're saying Exhibit 12A was obtained illegally?" Marcus tapped the envelope. "She thought she could bury the truth," he added, staring directly at Clara. "She used court system login credentials not assigned to her. We've tracked multiple flagged queries made under Judge Larson's staff access, dating back 3 months, all linked to this hearing, all tied to Miss Clara Carver." I didn't speak. I didn't breathe. I watched Clara's expression harden like clay in a kiln. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're all falling for her pathetic act." "I'm not here to claim," Marcus cut in. "I'm here to bury your lies," he said, voice like steel. "You accessed mental health records sealed under HIPAA. That's a federal violation." The room fell still. Marcus turned slightly toward me, but his tone didn't soften. "We've been investigating a pattern of ethical breaches tied to Miss Carver's legal activities. This custody hearing gave us grounds to broaden the scope." Clara looked at the judge, like she couldn't fathom this. "You can't take his word over mine. I've worked in the system for years." "That's precisely why this is grave," the judge said flatly. "Your arrogance betrays you." Clara's attorney, silent until now, finally spoke. "We'll need time to review any evidence." Marcus was already opening the packet. The top page bore Clara's name, time-stamped login credentials, and a list of accessed files including mine. "This isn't ambiguous," Marcus said. "It's clear law. Miss Carver's actions suggest a pattern of manipulation, including falsifying metadata and weaponizing sealed documents for personal gain." And then he said the line that hit harder than I expected. "I'm not here to defend you, Miss Carver," he told me. "I'm here to expose her." Something shifted inside me. Not relief, not victory, just clarity. For years I'd wondered if I'd misremembered, overblown things. But here it was. Paper, dates, facts. Still, Clara wasn't finished. She turned to me slowly, her voice low but cutting. "You'll pay for this, Elise," she hissed, eyes blazing. "You think I'm afraid of you? I built this courtroom. You're just a footnote I let linger too long." My hands clenched, but not with fear. I stepped closer, voice steady. "Your empire's crumbling, Clara. Then it's time to tear it down." The hallway felt colder when I stepped out of chambers, like the air had dropped 15 degrees just for me. My heels echoed on the granite, the click-click rhythm of a woman holding herself together. Clara was already there, leaning casually against the wall as if she hadn't just been unmasked. Her face was calm, almost amused. She tilted her head as I approached. "Cute little stunt back there," she said, her voice soft and syrupy. "I've got allies who'll lock you away," she taunted, smirking wider. "But you should know it only takes one signature to have you held for a 48-hour mental health evaluation. Sure you want to keep pushing?" Her words landed gently but stung sharply. Courthouse staff moved with practiced indifference. No one met my eyes, no one stepped in. That was the thing about power. It didn't need to shout. It'd whisper in hallways, dressed in a charcoal blazer and a smirk. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Not yet. My chest tightened, breath shallow. Clara's smile widened. "You're weak, Elise," she taunted, her voice a venomous whisper. "Didn't think so," she said, brushing past like she'd won again. I didn't know where my feet were leading until I found myself on the stone steps outside. The sun was high now, fierce and unrelenting, like it hadn't heard that everything inside me had dimmed. I sat on a bench under a leafless oak, just enough shade to hide in, not enough to soothe. A few gulls squawked near the curb. I didn't look at them. I just stared at my hands, still trembling. A memory surfaced, unbidden. I was 20. A thunderstorm, sudden and fierce. I was locked out of our shared apartment because Clara forgot I was coming home that weekend. "Stay out, you're not welcome," she'd shouted through the door. I banged on the door for 20 minutes before a neighbor let me in. That night I had my first panic attack. Our mother said I was being theatrical. A week later I was in therapy, not to heal, to be silenced. "Clara doesn't lie," my mother said. "Stop embarrassing us," she'd added sharply. "She just remembers things better than you." I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Julian's contact. I typed, "Maybe it's not worth it." Then I stared at the blinking cursor too long. "You all right, ma'am?" I looked up. A young woman stood a few feet away, holding out a water bottle. Her courthouse badge read Livia. Her dark eyes were wary, kind. "I saw what happened," she said. "Clara's a viper," she added, voice low. "That woman, your sister, she treats people like scraps. Uses them, discards them." I took the bottle. "You work for her?" "Interned. Not anymore." A pause. Then she added, "You haven't let her win yet, so don't." The words hit harder than they should have. I'd said something similar years ago to a college freshman whose roommate trashed her poetry out of spite. I didn't recall the girl's name, but I remembered her tears, and how she smiled when I told her not to surrender her victory just because someone louder claimed she'd lost. I stood. My body still felt unsteady, but something inside me had clicked back into place. Livia watched me. "Whatever you're about to do, make it sting," she said, her tone half teasing, half hopeful. I nodded. "It'll burn," I promised, fire in my voice. "It won't just sting, it'll resonate." I walked to the far end of the courtyard and dialed Julian. He answered on the first ring. "Talk to me." "I'm ready to file the motion," I said. "Use the full clause. Whistleblower status, no redactions." A pause. Then the familiar grit of his voice returned. "Let's end this, Elise," he said firmly. "About time, Carver," he said, and the line went quiet. By the time I re-entered the courtroom, the air had changed. The chatter was gone. The judge's assistant stood by the double doors, ushering reporters and visitors out. Closed session. Only legal counsel, essential staff, and involved parties would stay. Julian gave me a subtle nod as I took my seat. His calm anchored me until the opposing attorney stood and requested permission to call an expert witness for character context. "This will seal her fate," he boasted to Clara, smirking. That phrase alone sent alarms through my chest. The judge adjusted his glasses. "Proceed." The doors opened again. A tall, wiry man with a beard and a polished demeanor walked in. "Dr. Felix Hart," the clerk announced. My stomach churned. The name wasn't unfamiliar. Years ago, during my second year at Yale, he'd been mentioned briefly by my program director, but I'd never been his patient, never even met him. Dr. Hart took the stand with practiced ease. "I've seen her kind before," he said, glancing at me coldly. "I'm a clinical psychiatrist with 25 years of experience," he began. "During the Yale Global Scholars Program, I was consulted about a scholar named Elise Carver. Concerns of erratic behavior, emotional instability, and institutional noncompliance." A murmur rippled through the room. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I heard someone, Julian, maybe, say, "Objection," but it was drowned out by the sudden noise. The judge rapped his gavel once. "Let him finish. Then you may rebut." Clara sat in the front row, hands folded neatly, gaze locked on me like she was watching a play she already knew the ending to. Dr. Hart continued, "Though no inpatient treatment was mandated, I recommended a temporary leave from duties. It's my professional opinion that Miss Carver's profile showed patterns of paranoia and projection." My pulse pounded in my ears. I wanted to stand, to shout, but I did neither. I waited. I had to wait. Julian slid a manila envelope across the table, inside a scanned letter bearing the signature of Professor Elena Voss, the program director. I unfolded it with shaky fingers. It read, "To whom it may concern, Elise Carver remained in active standing during all program duties. She was never placed under evaluation, nor did she meet with any psychiatric staff. Any statement to the contrary is inaccurate and not reflected in institutional records." The judge asked if I had anything to submit. I stood. "Your Honor, I respectfully request permission to present sealed records from my academic file, including internal grievances and personal statements on the record, and I'd like to read them myself." A long pause. The judge looked at me for a moment, then nodded. I opened the folder. My hands were cold. I'd memorized every word over the years, but this was the first time I'd ever spoken them aloud. I, Elise Carver, filed a confidential harassment complaint against 3 peer scholars on April 12, 2020. No action was taken. Flip. On June 3, 2020, I was treated for a stress-induced migraine following months of work sabotage. I was told I was overreacting. Flip. Emails between Professor Voss and the grant committee indicate concern about interpersonal targeting, with Elise as the documented target. I kept going. The courtroom was silent. No coughs, no rustling papers, just my voice and the truth. Clara didn't interrupt. She didn't flinch. When I reached the final page, I paused. "This is my truth, not hers," I declared, voice steady. I was told, "You always make things harder than they need to be." That wasn't a diagnosis. It was a warning. I folded the record closed with trembling fingers and looked straight into Clara's eyes. Outside the courtroom, the late spring breeze rustled through the magnolias lining Liberty Street. I stood at the base of the courthouse steps, soaking in the calm before the storm. My breath misted faintly in the mild morning air, the quiet around me strangely comforting. I hadn't slept much in the past week. Not since the hearing adjourned, not since I spoke those words aloud. My resolve burned brighter than my exhaustion, but for the first time in years, I hadn't woken up feeling diminished. As I entered the courthouse lobby, I caught murmurs, a hushed tension in the air, like something unexpected was unfolding. 2 clerks near the security desk were whispering, barely audible. "Julian's taking over? Clara's done for," one said, eyes wide. "Did you hear who's presiding today?" I thought Judge Harrow had this docket. No, Harrow's out sick. Substitution was filed late last night. Carver's on the bench now. I paused mid-step. Carver, not me, Julian. My stomach lurched and lifted at once. I passed through the metal detector, clutching my bag to my chest. By the time I reached the gallery, all eyes were forward. The court officer stood tall by the door. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Julian Carver presiding." I froze. He entered from the side door in full robe, stoic, unreadable, not a flicker of recognition on his face. His presence commanded the room, a silent promise of justice. The same man who once mapped stars on my skin at 3:00 a.m. now sat behind the elevated bench, wooden gavel in hand, judicial calm masking the intensity I knew simmered beneath. Clara, seated 2 rows up with her attorney, let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. "This is your final card, Elise?" she scoffed, voice dripping with scorn. "You've got to be joking." Her lawyer tugged at her sleeve. "Quiet." She ignored him. "This is a farce, right? Her fiancé gets to rule on the case now? What's next, a jury of her best friends?" Julian lifted his head slightly. "Miss Carver, please be advised. I filed my judicial recusal from all familial affiliations effective 4 weeks ago. My assignment today is strictly procedural and was confirmed through the clerk's office. I'm here for the truth, not games," he added, his tone cutting. He tapped the file before him. "Now, shall we proceed?" Clara sank back, lips tight. Her voice lost its usual edge. Julian turned to the courtroom assistant. "Please enter into record Exhibit 9D, full audit disclosure of Carver Family Trust and associated nonprofit activities." The screen behind him lit up. Rows of figures, vendor names, timestamps, wire transfers. I'd seen the documents, yes, but hearing them read aloud by someone with authority to act made my skin prickle. Julian's voice was steady, each word a blade. "Clara's greed is exposed here," he said, pausing for emphasis. "According to this report, $620,000.00 was diverted from the Carver Women's Opportunity Fund through shell entities, Bright Path Solutions, Oakwood Media, and Horizon Collective. All traced to Miss Clara Carver's personal accounts." Clara opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. Her lawyer pressed a hand to his brow. Julian continued, tone resolute. "Your betrayal ends here, Clara," he said, voice like a gavel. "These transfers occurred during fiscal years when the trust was dormant, meaning Elise Carver's portion was frozen but used as silent collateral in private debt clearance." I sat still. I didn't interrupt. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. This wasn't revenge. It was validation. Julian looked down at the bench, then back to the potties. "The court finds substantial cause to pursue a civil breach inquiry under Fiduciary Violation Code 42.7c. Effective immediately, this matter is referred to the Department of Justice for investigation." Clara flinched. I watched her eyes dart left, then right, panic cracking her polished facade, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Julian didn't look at me once, not even after the ruling. He stood, nodded to the clerk, and exited the bench as cleanly as he'd entered. Only then did I stand, but not to follow him. I turned toward the back of the courtroom and caught my reflection in the tall glass panel near the door. Same navy suit, same posture, but something had changed. My eyes burned with newfound fire. My face no longer looked small. I didn't look like someone waiting to be chosen or shielded or validated. I looked like someone who finally belonged. And not because I fought louder. I didn't win by shouting. I won by waiting, by proving, by refusing to vanish. The courtroom began to clear. Shoes clicked on the old granite floors, papers shuffled into briefcases, and faint chatter hummed like an engine winding down. I'd just reached the tall oak doors, fingers brushing the cool brass handle, when I heard it. "Your Honor, we request an emergency injunction." The words cut through the room like a blade on stone. I turned. Clara's attorney was on his feet, waving a legal motion like a desperate signal. "This is our last stand," he barked, glaring at me. "This entire session is compromised. Conflict of interest. The presiding judge is the romantic partner of the petitioner. We believe bias has tainted every ruling." Clara's eyes were wide, not scared, but alight. She was smiling again, the same smile she wore when she cornered me in the hallway last week, the same one she wore when she forged my name on that grant. Julian had already stepped down, protocol observed, but he turned back slightly, his mouth a flat line. The bailiff retrieved the motion and passed it to the clerk. Within moments, it reached Judge Evelyn Nora Barrett, retired but called in for emergency review. "Judge Barrett has taken emergency oversight," the clerk announced. "All eyes on the truth now," she added sternly. "Please remain seated." I didn't speak. Not yet. Clara, now almost gleeful, leaned into her attorney's shoulder and whispered something. "We've got her now," she muttered, smirking. His chest puffed. He must have thought they'd trapped me. I reached into my bag, the same canvas briefcase I'd carried since the first hearing, the same one my father gave me when I graduated. I hadn't opened it publicly until now. I walked back toward the bench, heels deliberate, pulse even. I handed a sealed envelope to the clerk, who passed it along. "Your Honor," I said calmly, "this is my father's truth," I declared firmly. "That document contains an affidavit notarized 3 months before my father passed. I ask that it be entered into the sealed record." Judge Barrett adjusted her glasses. "Do you understand what this means, Miss Carver? Once I open this, we proceed under sworn admission. There's no taking it back." "I understand," I said. And I did. The judge broke the wax seal, her brows lifting slightly as she read. She paused once, then twice, then read aloud. "I, Leonard T. Carver, being of sound mind and clear intent, do hereby declare that the initial concept, funding, and operational proposal for the Carver Women's Opportunity Fund were the sole creation of Elise Noom Carver. I insisted her sister Clara be presented as the face of the foundation to protect the family's image and secure traditional donor confidence. I deeply regret this decision." The courtroom didn't erupt. It collapsed into silence. The words continued, signed, dated, witnessed, notarized. "I took from Elise what she built. I let Clara pretend. I told myself it was for the greater good, but I know now it was cowardice." Clara shot up. "Lies! He loved me more," she screamed, voice breaking. "This is fabricated. He'd never—" Judge Barrett raised a palm. "Sit down, Miss Carver." Clara's mouth opened, then closed. Her voice, for the first time, had nowhere to go. Judge Barrett continued, "The motion to suspend proceedings on the basis of conflict is denied. The document provided is valid. Furthermore, based on this affidavit and accompanying financial disclosures, this court rules that Miss Clara Carver shall be removed from all founding and operational documents of the Carver Women's Opportunity Fund, effective immediately. She looked up, voice firm. "Your reign is over, Miss Clara," she said sharply. "You may have had the stage, Miss Clara, but the spotlight was never yours." Clara sat slowly. Her attorney pressed his fingers to his temple, muttering, "We're ruined," under his breath, already sensing the appeals process forming like storm clouds. The clerk approached me with a fresh copy of the revised Articles of Incorporation. My name alone now stood at the top. Founder. I took the paper with steady hands and said nothing. There was nothing to say that the truth hadn't already proclaimed louder. The sun was sinking outside the courtroom windows, casting warm golden light across the benches. It touched Clara's face, but for once she wasn't basking. She looked smaller, not broken, but revealed. And me? I didn't feel like a victor. I felt like a woman who'd been carrying stones in her pockets for years and finally set them down. My heart sang with quiet triumph. Truth, it turns out, isn't a spectacle. It's a weight, one that settles so deeply no one can lift it for you. But once it lands, there's no denying its existence. Power didn't look like shouting. It looked like holding the truth until it was too heavy to ignore. 4 weeks later, the courthouse was a fading memory, not gone, but softer, like rain after a downpour. My name was cleared, my rights restored, my work legally mine again. But freedom? That was still something I was learning to carry. That morning I arrived early, before the staff, before the bustle, before the world woke. The sun was just cresting the rooftops, painting amber streaks across the pavement outside the new center. A pair of finches flitted along the sidewalk, as if inspecting the place themselves. The community center had been rebuilt from the ground up, literally. The court had ordered full financial restitution, the shell companies were dismantled, the shady contracts voided, every diverted dollar recovered and returned. Inside, it smelled of fresh varnish and possibility. The walls, now a pale slate blue, stood bare, for now, waiting for art from the girls who would soon fill this space. I walked the halls slowly, touching door frames, window sills, the edges of the corkboard in the common room. Each step felt like reclaiming my soul. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to brace myself before turning a corner. There were no shadows left to evade. It was mine now. All of it. Not just on paper. In truth, Clara hadn't apologized. She hadn't looked at me since the ruling. A week ago, she'd held a brief press conference, just long enough to announce her voluntary step back from public leadership to focus on personal growth. "I'll rise again," she vowed to the cameras, defiant. She didn't mention my name. She didn't say sorry. She blamed evolving priorities and missteps, like the foundation had simply glitched on its own. People asked if I wanted to respond on air. Some pitched a memoir deal. I declined it all. Let her fill the silence with spin. I was done filling mine with defense. Julian visited once, just once. He didn't bring gifts or apologies, just stood beside me as we watched the staff set up the art stations. He asked softly, "Do you want me to stay?" I took a deep breath before answering. "I need to stand alone now," I said, voice resolute. "I think I need to find out who I am without someone saving me," I said, "even if that someone meant well." He nodded. He didn't argue. He just rested a hand on my shoulder for a moment, then left. Some things, I'd learned, aren't meant to be rebuilt. They're meant to be remembered, right? Later that morning, I stopped by the art room. A few girls were already there, guided by a new volunteer named Mira, barely 21, eyes bright behind round glasses. One girl, maybe 10, sat at the far end of the table, focused on a piece of blue paper in her small hands. When I approached, she looked up and smiled shyly. Without a word, she held something out to me. A paper star, folded precisely, carefully, the points slightly uneven but proud. I froze. Years ago, I'd made one just like it. I'd given it to Clara when we were teens, after she won her first speech contest. I thought it was a gesture, a quiet token of sisterhood. She'd laughed, tossed it aside. Trash, like you, she'd sneered. Said I was always making odd little things nobody wanted. Now, here was a child offering me the same shape. No mockery, no agenda, just something beautiful, crafted with care and given free. I took the star gently from her hand. It was still warm from her fingers. "Thank you," I said, voice soft. She beamed. "It's for strength," she said, eyes shining. "I make them when I feel happy. Maybe you needed one." I nodded. Maybe I did. Outside, the sun had risen higher, bathing the pavement in gold. I stepped out, the paper star still in my hand, sunlight on my face. And for once, I didn't need to explain anything to anyone. Not to Clara, not to Julian, not to the press or the past or the pages of a sealed affidavit. I was free, and that was enough. Because sometimes healing doesn't shout. Sometimes it folds itself into a small blue star and says, "You're allowed to start again." The star was still warm from the girl's hand. I tucked it close and walked into the sun.